Welcome to Are You Ready with your Bible teacher, Carlos Grillo. What's happening in the world? Let's look at the Bible.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Are You Ready? We are very happy tonight. We have a special guest once again to have him with us, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. Before we get to talking, we have a lot to talk to and ask Dr. Peter Vincent Pry tonight. I want to remind you, please, if you're watching for the first time, Are You Ready? Please subscribe. Click notification, and please share this video with as many people as possible. And please listen, open your ears and listen to what he is going to talk about, what he is going to share. And whatever information you hear, you make your own decision, what you need to do, what needs to be done. You can do your part, okay? And again, we're so glad to have Dr. Peter Vincent Pry with us. He's, as you know, he's been involved with the EMP Commission, and he has a lot of information. And we have some major things, as you know. We just had today there was an internet outage, and earlier this week there was we know about the possibly the Chinese were involved in another cyber attack. So it's going from Russia to China back and forth. And before we get started, we got lots of questions. And if you have any questions, please, you can write them on the chat, and hopefully we'll get asked Dr. Pry. But before we get started, like always, I would like to, once again, Dr. Pry, thank you for being on our program here on Are You Ready once again. And before you get answering questions, can you let the people here on Are You Ready, maybe they're new and don't know who you are, but I believe many people do, but please let them know who you are and what your background is. Please, thank you.
Well, I've spent a professional lifetime working in national security, dealing with nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction. You know, I worked at the CIA, then as the House Armed Services Committee on a professional staff as an advisor to the 60 members of Congress on the Armed Services Committee, you know, which writes the defense budget and plays an important role in setting national security policy. I served on the Strategic Posture Commission, you know, which deals with U.S. nuclear strategy. I was the director of the U.S. Nuclear Strategy Forum, the Congressional Advisory Board, and then I was chief of staff of the Congressional EMP Commission for 17 years, and today I am the director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security, you know, which is sort of the successor to the EMP Commission, a Congressional Advisory Board, although much scaled back. We don't have the power or the resources that the original EMP Commission had. And if people want to know more about my background and what I've done, they could get one of my books, which is The Power and the Light, the Congressional EMP Commission's War to Save America, available at Amazon.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Dr. Pry, you have plenty of experience to share with the people here on Are You Ready? But before we get started with it, we're going to ask. We got lots of questions, and I looked at the article you sent me, and I went through it, so I got some questions regarding that. But before we get to that, I wanted you to see if you wanted to comment on what happened earlier this week on Monday. There was the U.S. Condemning China for cyber attacks involved, and I know the EU and other nations got together and they said, yes, China was behind quite a few cyber attacks against these countries and against the United States. What would you say? Is this credible? Can we say yes, it was China? What would you say?
The data myself, but based on the report that was done jointly by the national and CISA, the Critical Infrastructure and Security Agency. Not that those people are particularly competent, but I would accept at face judgment that China was behind those attacks. After all, China's been in the United States for many years, and one of the things I give them credit for, and something we've discussed on this program,
Yes.
is that they figured they sort of looked on these Chinese cyber attackers stealing. Were they interested in? Is that what this is about? Which has been basically saying the ransomware attacks, that it's all about money. Or are they actually interested in penetrating, our critical infrastructures for, so they can take us down in the event of a war? And they, by offering information that would have enabled the Chinese to do better ransomware attacks, so they could coerce and blackmail the industry. But they weren't interested in that. They give them a choice between hacking into that, into the stuff that would have enabled them to make money, and critical information that, which they probably provide false information. Although the Chinese have gathered enough information to make money, and went right for the information that allow them to, or they thought would allow oil and gas pipelines, which is what that. If they'd been reading my books, they would have known 10 years ago that that's what China and Russia and North Korea are really all about. This is not about money. These are not independent any independent criminal organizations in China or Russia. They all serve these totalitarians. They're all covered, for their cyber agencies, for the SVR, for the GRU, Russian military intelligence. They're all part of the war machine of these various countries. And that's what this has been about for many years. But I am the combined brain power of and CISA and the FBI last week, something
10 years ago. Now, just to continue on that point, what are could this be every time they're doing this, whether it's Russia or China? Could these be? I think we've spoken about this. Could these be dry runs for something major?
Exactly.
And they're just trying to see what they can do.
Yeah. As they assume that that's the maximum threat. For example, when the Colonial Pipeline hack happened, talk about how terrible the Colonial Pipeline. But nobody, and some of my colleagues, went beyond that to say, this is you have to look beyond it. They're not interested in just temporarily shutting down. Or in the Solar Winds hack that happened a few months before it. They weren't interested where they had free, they were able to penetrate all of the major agencies and departments of the U.S. government, plus thousands of defense. We don't even know what they were up to. But it would be a miracle if cyber weapons, within infrastructures, as well as our government computers.
Okay.
They did know that the Solar Winds hack was about gathering information. But they acted like that. That's not what all these things are. These are the tip of the spear. They're gaining the capability, have those capabilities, frankly, to do things like shut down the electric, but for a protracted period, months, maybe years, to shut down oil communications, to shut down. It's what I call a blackout war. I've got a book that'll be publishing in August or September called Blackout Warfare, which is, and it's not just cyber. Okay, they define cyber warfare differently than we do. We think of cyber warfare as limited to
Right.
bits, bytes, and computer bugs and hacking and stuff like that. The Russians and Chinese and North Koreans have a much broader definition. It starts with that, but then it escalates to include small groups of special forces teams. It would only take about fewer running around the country, shooting up extra high voltage transformers, non-nuclear EMP weapons, using non-nuclear EMP weapons to fry key critical infrastructures, including the electric grid. The electric grid is the biggest target, the most important target, because everything depends directly or indirectly on electricity. And when you black out the electric grid, everything gets blacked out. And then the ultimate cyber weapon is a nuclear EMP attack, which I've described at length on your past shows. This is not Hiroshima or Nagasaki type use of a nuclear weapon. You're detonating it in outer space, 300 kilometers above the center of the United States is one scenario. That's so high up that if you were on the ground directly beneath the explosion, you wouldn't even hear it go off because it's going off in the vacuum of space. No blast reaches the surface of the Earth. There's no fallout associated with that. Nothing associated with it except the electromagnetic pulse, which is like a super energetic radio wave that's got so much energy in it that it will crash electric grids, cause airplanes to fall out of the sky, cars won't work, telecommunications get shut down. It's the ultimate cyber weapon in their military doctrine. And so these attacks are just small potatoes. They're the tip of the spear. They're practicing for this big new revolutionary way of warfare. They consider it the greatest, most decisive revolution in military affairs in history.
Right.
It's called blackout war. They call it other things. They call it no contact warfare or total information warfare or cyber warfare. Many names, but it all boils down to the same thing. A combination of cyber attacks, physical sabotage, non-nuclear EMP, and then the ultimate blow, the nuclear EMP attack. And you can take down our critical infrastructures at any one of these. But but any general, wants the synergistic effects, wants to throw in the kitchen sink, and make sure you're killing your adversary, making the cyber rubble bounce, throwing all coordinated way. It's basically a blitzkrieg cyberspace. Much as I refer to the German affairs, they're blitzkrieg, they're coordinated. Air power, mobile infantry, mobile artillery, within one small step of winning World War II.
That is
the only reason that didn't happen was because we had to learn blitzkrieg with the lives of our soldiers in the deserts of North Africa and the plains of Russia. Cost the Russians 30 million men, to learn how to fight a better blitzkrieg.
I have a question. It's regarding the same. It's like we're talking about Jenna at this moment, because I've seen in the news tensions, as you know, between the United States and China and the South China Sea. My question to you, because we talked about all these things before, the EMP, the non-nuclear, the nuclear, and all this technology that they have, the capability that China has. How long? Because I think there are people who believe that we could have a conventional war with China, but how long before that conventional war turns to something like we just mentioned? Will China just find a conventional war before they use all this technology you're mentioning?
No, I don't think it would unfold. I think they would fight the blackout war and hope they could win that way.
Yes.
And then they would fight a conventional war, and only if it became necessary. And we can see the example in October of last year. India and China nuclear weapons.
Yes.
Neither side wanted it to escalate to a nuclear conflict. they had small groups, company-sized groups, hundreds of men, not thousands, but hundreds of men, fighting with each other, and they were doing it with fists. Basically,
I remember
Stone Age shovels, a Stone Age, because nobody wanted to fire, escalate into a nuclear conflict
war
in India and China,
right.
And to resolve this issue in its favor, which is a city of over 10 million people, it could black out all of India, because just like a smaller version of the electric grid in India, which has a lot of Chinese transformers, Chinese SCADAs. To the thinking of China's political and military, that they think launching a blackout warfare, and the smart thing to do before you get a war going, even between hundreds of guys shooting their rifles off, less escalatory, safer thing. So I think that's what would happen. Similarly, size Vostok 18 that happened in 2018, military exercise in world history. And genetics, by the way. China and Russia were allied in exercise against some, almost, but the exercise involved 300,000 troops, tanks and other vehicles, aircraft, hundreds of ships. But before the team, this simulated big, also involved nuclear force. So it was a conventional, but a month before Vostok 18 happened, they simulated, massive cyber on hundreds of U.S. electric utilities.
Wow!
And so I think
they're prepared.
Way they would do it. Out war comes first, and hopefully you can win and shut the United States down that way, and then you don't have a nuclear war. But do so if it didn't work out, the way they hoped with the blackout war.
Correct. So before we move on, for me to understand, if hypothetical, if we went into, because people have these thoughts, if we go into the South China Sea, for example, protecting Taiwan, if China entered into Taiwan and the U.S. feels obligated to come in to help Taiwan, will if the U.S. gets involved, will China just not spend any time, like you're saying, just jump and disconnect everything over here and before they get into any big nuclear battle? You would say that probably they would do.
They might, but another option, including one, I can't remember the year, I think it was 2020, in the spring of 2020, where Chinese strategists were openly talking about, what do we do about these pesky intrusions by the U.S. Navy into the South China Sea? That's our territory. What do we do to dissuade the United States from coming into our territory, which is not their territory? Right? They've annexed it illegally. Yes. And one of the things they said, well, we could do an EMP attack on these U.S. Navy vessels.
Yes, I heard that.
It wouldn't kill anybody, but it would paralyze the ship, and that'd give the United States a bloody nose and teach them a lesson. So, they might actually do something and attack the U.S. Navy. And if they did it with a nuclear EMP attack, that would send us a clear signal that if we're going to get involved, it's not going to be limited to the region of Taiwan. It's for our homeland. And they'll even use nuclear EMP to do it. And so before they did the big thing, the blackout war and shut down the American homeland, and they might do that. They might, okay? but at least in terms of what their public discussions and some of their scenarios are in their military writings, they might do a smaller thing just against the U.S., to send us a signal. And I think it would actually work. Can you imagine? I mean, the West so propagandized the idea that nuclear war is unwinnable, and they are terrible. They certainly are terrible, especially to democracies, that the lives of our soldiers and citizens, civilians, take any casualties is considered. But can you did that? And they were willing to make a nuclear EMP attack in the Pacific. A president would then have to say, and all of his left-wing advisors, of nuclear weapons. In fact, just today, there's another article about how the Democrat Party is pressuring President Biden to reduce reliance on nuclear weapons, move away from our nuclear deterrent. These people are so frightened of nuclear weapons. And the Chinese know that, and so the president would say, wow, if I can go over to rescue Taiwan, they've done an EMP attack, a nuclear EMP attack on the U.S. Navy. Is this going to escalate to a nuclear EMP attack, a cyber warfare, a blackout war on the American homeland, which puts at risk 330 million American lives? Is the sovereignty of Taiwan really worth a risk for the United States? The White House and the Pentagon would conclude that it is not. Let Taiwan go. Of the nuclear umbrella, and the bad guys.
I agree.
What nation? What guarantee? That we have given to Japan, the Baltic states, the frontline NATO states. Are we really going to risk the states, in order to follow through on our security gear that most people can't even find on a map?
Correct.
It's been a huge years that bad guys won't call that more credible bluff during the Cold War. The Russians, to gain an advantage. Careful to try to maintain at least the nuclear balance, as they would get no advantage of nuclear weapons or the technological sophistication of those. Situation today, decline in our nuclear deterrent, credibility of our nuclear deterrent has never been lower. And China and even North Korea have all got weapons. We have weapons that we don't even have any counterparts to, like super EMP weapons. And our nuclear weapons, are 40.
Wow.
Literally, they were not only patching them up and nursing them along. There was a big celebration last week. U-88, which is one of our most important nuclear warheads, has finally been. They're calling it a modernized W-88 missile submarine fleet, and we are so capable of deceiving ourselves with our language about the modernized W-88. A modern nuclear weapon, is not a weapon that's 40 or 50 years old, that's been patched up, and recycled. The W-88 is nuclear tire. It's got 100 patches on it, and it hasn't been tested with all those patches on it. They're not even alive anymore. And at the weapons labs with computer models, that say, well, according to the computer model, it should work with all those patches on it. So they certify that it's going to work. They don't know it's going to work. And some of the few guys that are still left who are real nuclear weapon scientists, people that I respect and have worked with, like John Foster, who's designed, Dr. John Foster used to be the director of Lawrence Livermore National Labs and has served many presidents. But most of the nuclear weapons in our current inventory were designed by him. He's now retired. He's been alarming. He's been raising the alarm for years that the credibility, it's questionable whether those nuclear weapons will even work anymore because they haven't been tested for 30 years. And you can't just keep changing, in effect, patching the thing up, patching it up, and expect it to work. And the Russians, Chinese know that. Just give you an example on the W88. I know we don't have all night, all the rest, but I just thought this was just a great example.
Yes, please.
Of how our nuclear design capabilities have so deteriorated. They basically had to replace everything except the physics package. By the physics package, I mean the plutonium trigger.
Right.
Used to basically set off a small A-bomb. It raises the temperatures that enables you to fuse tritium, which causes the H-bomb explode. Okay, that gives you most of it. Only that is the original stuff. But they had to replace everything else around it. It was in all such bad shape. And it took them 2 years to figure out how to do that. One of the problems, this is just one of the problems, okay? There was a special transistor, okay, that when it was originally built, it cost $5. And the manufacturer of that transistor no longer exists. The design they couldn't find the blueprint for the transistor. $5 transistor. And they spent millions of dollars to reinvent this transistor, to figure out how to build it and make another transistor, and that held up. That was just one of the problems. It kept the W88, out of circulation for 2 years. And now they're celebrating that they put another 50 patches on the W88 in the back,
and hoping it works.
Yeah, and hope that it works. If we get into a crisis or conflict, this is not parity. This is not maintaining a level playing field in the nuclear balance when the other side has got brand new nuclear weapons, and not just. Another thing to understand is these nuclear weapons that we have in our arsenal now, they were designed in a different century, okay? With different strategic environments. When blast and shock, was the big thing, a great big explosion to have blast and shock. This is a different world when the other side has got highly specialized that aren't chiefly designed for blast and shock. Super EMP, for example, doesn't have any blast and shock. Can paralyze, and we have nothing like that. A weapon that basically won't kill people, but it'll kill the electric grid and all the electronics in your society. Or ultra low yield weapons that make no fallout, so that you can have a dial yield and have the yield down really low. So you can have that to just take out a bridge, like it's a very powerful conventional weapon, or dial it up further so you can take out an army division, or dial it up even further so you can take out an Air Force base or a Navy fleet at sea. Neutron weapons that are specialized for special effects, like putting out a lot of neutron radiation, which is great for tanks and for aircraft, or X-rays, which is what the Russians have got on their anti-missile systems, great for killing our warheads. If we tried to retaliate against them, they'd fry them with X radiation weapons. These are called third generation nuclear weapons that have all these specialized effects. They're not great big nuclear firecrackers that are just designed to make a great big explosion. That's what our nuclear weapons are. Mm-hmm. It is, how do we respond to something like that? We don't have equivalent weapons to respond to a super EMP, to a really low yield weapon that can for tactical purposes, or X-ray weapons that can hit heads, or neutron weapons that can take out aircraft and tanks. It's not a credible or appropriate response to send an H-bomb over there, to blow up a city, for example, or create a big explosion somewhere. That's another thing. If Russia invades NATO, maybe our allies won't want us to light off a great big explosive H-bomb in the middle of Lithuania, which will make the whole country uninhabitable for 100 years, destroying the village in order to save it from the Russians, by nuclear means is not a smart strategy, we need selective, clean weapons, just like the adversary has. And we don't even have, we've been talking, now we're talking about the nuke.
Right. If I
biggest vulnerability is, but yeah, across the gamut, we are, it's just like 1938, where the bad guys have worked out high-tech, revolutionary new ways. See, Germany, it was the Blitzkrieg. In the case of the Japanese, it was carrier-based aviation. War II broke out. Our Navy didn't be decisive. They thought they were for scouting missions. They thought the battle for the chessboard in the Pacific, and that turned out true. And that assumption almost lost us the war in the Pacific. It opened us up to a Pearl Harbor. But our failure of strategic imagination, is probably is more dangerous even than the technological gap that exists, because our guys haven't even figured out why these technological advantages that the adversary has developed, why do they matter? They're going to be completely surprised at the other side.
Okay, I want to ask you. This is great information you're sharing. Great information. I want to get started talking about the article you did, which is I think it was called "The Illusion" or "The Great Illusion," correct? And in there, one of the things I looked at. Please, you talked about the START Treaty and the new START Treaty. Can you explain to our audience, those who are watching, Are You Ready? What is the START and what is this new START? What is it? If you can explain it.
Okay. START is the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. Let me start back a little further, okay? Because it's interesting, we should be talking about this on July 22nd, which is the date of our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
All of this, I can't remember the year, but it was on this day, maybe it was 1985, don't remember the year, but it was on this day that Soviet Gorbachev agreed to negotiate this treaty with Ronald Reagan. And it began the process that led to start a new, and the INF treaty was the first control treaty that actually reduced, in fact, it eliminated. Up to that point, what arms control was doing was limiting the growth of the arms race. The weapons kept piling up. The numbers of weapons kept getting bigger and bigger, only slow growth of the nuclear weapons. But under Ronald Reagan's treaty, the first time it acted back the number of weapons. In fact, as I said, it eliminated on both the Soviet side this whole class of intermediate range nuclear. And that principle of arms reduction, the numbers of nuclear weapons, with the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. The INF Treaty limited intermediate. The START Treaty limited intercontinental forces, bombers, intercontinental missiles, intercontinental submarines, and the weapons they carried. And it rolled it back. And then the new START Treaty under Obama rolled supposedly reduce the numbers even further, so that today, under the United States and Russia are illegal in 1,550 range intercontinental warheads. All right, and that percent reduction in the numbers of nuclear weapons.
Wow.
And the arms control community, because this is what my article is about, but it's an illusion. Okay, we have been arms control. It's a strategic culture. It's part of our strategic culture. The people who specialize in that would object and say, "Oh, every country and every civilization, no matter what their history, can embrace arms control." And it's simply not. In our universities and in our senior academies, when you talk, it's mostly about arms control. Not about fighting wars, including nuclear wars, but it's about, well, how can we limit the danger from nuclear weapons by negotiating with the other side and signing a treaty, because that's how things work inside our free society, where contract law is a big deal, where we believe in negotiating our differences, where we believe in coexistence within our society with the other side, with the other guy. That's how we think in a free and constitutional republic. All right?
That's how we think.
No. How we think. They don't think that way. Constitutions that are written in. They have courts which are a farce and are just designed to take political dissidents and send them to the Gulag Archipelago or execute them. That's what they're about.
Yes.
They're about victory. They're about the will to power. They're about the living and the dead, and they want to be the living. They don't believe in coexistence, even within their own societies. Their competitions are settled often lethally by killing your political opponent.
Mm-hmm.
That's how their society. Oh yeah, we'll sign this arms control treaty with you, but they have no intent to constantly break these treaties. The Chinese break them. When you look at it's embarrassing. How the United States naively, decade after arms control, even though these treaties. For example, let's go back to that New START.
Correct.
All right. Legally, there were 1,550 nuclear weapons. Maybe I should back up a little further. Let's go back to the INF Treaty, all right, that eliminated that whole class of nuclear weapons. But guess what?
Correct.
Why did President Trump pull out? The Russians were cheating on.
He came out of it.
Yeah, and the State Department, years to admit, one of the big disadvantages we have, the department is responsible for deciding if an arms control. But the State Department has a vested interest in, because their whole these treaties and their claim to fame and negotiate these treaties, hope to be in the history books, is because, and they don't want to look like Neville Chamberlain, peace in our time, come back with some scrap of paper signed by an Adolf Hitler and be a fool, right? So they have interest to cover up and do everything they can to deny the reality. But after many years, finally, the weight of evidence got so compelling. Even the had to admit the Russians were violating the INF Treaty. So Reagan, this thing called the presidential nuclear, in which the United States and Russia were supposed to eliminate their tactical nuclear weapons. These are nuclear, they have lower yields, smaller yields, and things. We used to have 15,000 tactical weapons, and we dismantled all but about 200 of them. And so now we have 200 obsolete tactical nuclear weapons that are bunkered in Europe. That's all that's left of our tactical nuclear weapons. Guess who violated Russia cheated on the PNI, and they have at least a 10, because they didn't dismantle their nuclear weapons the way we did, and now it took years for the State Department to finally admit that. So they cheated on the PNI. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. 30 years ago, the Clinton administration had this clever idea that if we could get all countries to agree not to test nuclear weapons,
Right.
Eventually they'd become obsolete and we could move away from the evils of nuclear weapons. And so the United States, now the Senate was smarter than Bill Clinton, thank God. And so they never signed on to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. But nonetheless, the United States has unilaterally observed the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty all these years, and hoping that China and Russia would also observe it. Okay?
Correct.
And it wasn't until last year, 2020, that the State Department finally came out and said, Russia's been violating the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, and China too, for 30 years. They finally admitted that. So that's why the Russians and Chinese have got this huge technological great leap ahead of us. It's for 30 years they've been conducting low-yield nuclear testing, to develop advanced generation nuclear weapons. So now we come to the New START Treaty.
Right.
It's the last treaty that the State Department claims hasn't been violated. They violated all the other treaties, but the State Department says, well, we don't see evidence that they violated it. Well, that's because the verification provisions in the New START Treaty were so bad that it's very, very difficult, to come up with the evidence that it's being violated. To give you one example, I mean, it's just so ridiculous, but it sounds like the kind of thing. It's the sort of naive thing that Western democracies do. If you want to know where we are today, go back and read Winston Churchill's The Gathering Storm. Excellent book about what happened. How did we get into World War II? And he talks about how, the liberal governments in France and Britain, right in front of their faces, the Nazis and the Japanese were violating all the treaties, the equivalent of the arms control treaties. But, they didn't want to face those facts, except for a handful of people like Winston Churchill. They would come up with all kinds of excuses as to why, having a pocket battleship isn't that bad, and, to rationalize and explain away the treaty violations. We have exactly the same mentality today. So, I mean, it doesn't take a genius, but think of this as sort of an intelligence test, right? Those intelligence tests where you try to complete a pattern. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, what's the next number in the pattern? It's going to be 4, right?
Right.
All right. So, Russia's violated the INF Treaty. Russia's violated the Presidential Nuclear Initiative. Russia's violated the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. New START Treaty. The State Department says, well, we haven't violated it yet. Okay? Analysts that I have tremendous respect for, I mean, some of the smartest people in Washington, have concluded that Russia is violating the New START Treaty. And a guy named Mark Schneider, for example, wrote a book in Real Clear Defense, I think it was, an article called, does Russia have a 2-to-1 advantage in strategic nuclear weapons? And I think they do. They probably have at least that. Another thing is China. Pentagon a few months ago told us that China's only got 200 strategic.
That's right. I remember you
And
mentioned
now we see they're building 145 in 2 or 3 years with the DF-41 ICBM. ICBM has 10 warheads in it. If you deploy that's 1,450 just on that one system. If they happen to already, so I think it's just another failure. But the point of my kind of down in the weeds here, I'm trying to make, is that we don't, Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans do, we don't think fighting instruments for winning wars adversaries so that you can win without war, okay? Using them. We have been conditioned not to think in those terms. There's a couple of assumptions that go into arms control theory. You know, because arms control theory assumes that if you have parity sides, that you're safer, it provides for a balance of power. That's why all the intelligence, and you have all these academics, cottage industries of academics, they're always telling us how North Koreans have, the China, with great confidence. One part of the great illusion is we have no idea how many will tell us, or if they do not, you know, we have no way of independently verifying. And the estimates from other sources are all over the place. China, for example, the difference between the DoD's estimate, the Department of Defense, and other independent assessments is tenfold. You know, the Russians, for example, Pentagon says the China's got 200 weapons. A Russian general, Vladimir Yeltsin, thinks that China has between 1,600 and 1,800 weapons, not more than 200, right?
Yeah.
An independent analyst who used to work for the Defense Department, named Phil Carver, estimates that China could have 3,000 weapons hidden away, which is twice as many nuclear weapons as we have. All right? But part of the great illusion is, oh, ignore those guys. You know, we know how many weapons they have. And that's a lie. We don't know how many weapons they have. But you see, if you admit that, arms control doesn't work, because arms control has to know how many weapons the other guy has. The second part of the great illusion is that mentally wrong, in effect a lie, to say, well, if we've got the same, or, I mean, after those silos were discovered, the 145 ICBM silos, there was in almost every article that reported the 145 ICBM silos, the reporter would also say, but you know, we're still way ahead of China in the number of nuclear weapons. You know, we have, you know, 1,400 weapons, and China, you know, 200 according to the Defense Department. And whatever, maybe they've got 350, but whatever in ours, and so we're safe. So we don't have to worry about that yet. But that's not true. You know, this is a very simplistic way of assessing the strategic environment. You know, if you're thinking like a warfighter, okay, you don't need to pose a mortal threat to the United States. North Korea, for example, could make an EMP attack with one super nuclear war against us, with just one weapon, by frying our critical infrastructures and paralyzing our strategic forces and the command and control assets that are necessary to launch them. China, as soon as it gets 40 DF-41 ICBMs, and it probably already has that many right now today, you know, That's 400 warheads. You know, the target set in the United States is 500. You know, we have 400 ICBM silos. It's less than 500. You know, that's very close. We have 400 ICBM silos, 3 bomber bases, 2 ballistic missile submarine bases, and then a handful of command and control assets. So it's in the low 400s. So the DF-41 today would probably do a successful first strike, you know, against the U.S. nuclear deterrent and disarm us.
Wow.
Without building a single new ICBM silo, right? But China wants to, you know, just like the Russians, they believe in mass, they believe in making the rubble bounce. And so they're, in addition to having, you know, a nuclear war fighting or winning capability, they also want to be able to win man.
Right.
By being able to, you know, in our face, ICBM silos, and we became aware of that on the 100th Communist Party conference, celebrating, announced that it's going to dominate the world, and then we find 145 new silos being. And
I wanted to ask you next, if I could. You said in the article about the Great Illusion, you said that, and I think you may have started talking about that China does not need to have nuclear parity to prevail. What do you mean? One more question. What are the diminishing capability of the Chinese nuclear forces? You said what are the diminishing the capability of the Chinese nuclear forces? Your opinion. Are they diminishing? Are they, I think you're saying they're growing. And then, but you did say that China does not need to have nuclear parity to prevail. What do you mean? And I think you started talking about that.
The arms control perspective is that in order for a country to prevail over the United States, they need more nuclear weapons than we have. Okay, so we don't even build up to the level permitted under the New START Treaty. Okay, the New START Treaty allows us 1,550 weapons. We actually only have 1,300 strategic nuclear weapons. You know, we like to stay below the levels, you know, to signal our potential adversaries that, you know, we're not really a threat to them. So from an arms control perspective, and what all these reporters are telling the American people, all these just, oh, don't worry about those ICBM silos in the desert, because they don't have missiles in them yet. And we have a big numerical advantage over nuclear weapons, so we're safe.
Yeah.
And I'm saying illusion. They don't need to match us in the number. They need is to be able to achieve a first strike against.
That's it.
Okay.
First strike.
To make a counter. To be able to do a first strike and take out our ICBMs, take out 3 bomber bases, missile submarine bases, then a handful, and some other command and control nodes, but it's in low 4. They've already got that with the DF-41. You know, they can do that. So you know, because our target set is so small. It's not the number of weapons sides have. It's what you have to do with those weapons that matters. Their job, in order to win the war, is destroy our nuclear forces and command and they can do that with about 400 nuclear and just 41 ICBMs, which they already have enabled them to do that. So they're already in a position to threaten us. It is not true that because we have many more nuclear weapons than China, that we should feel safe, and that China is definitely, and that we have nuclear superiority over China. In China, you know, it's a much bigger target set. Know that the nuclear weapons that we have are adequate to cover itself in China. To name just one of them, China has this underground Great Wall, that's 5
Wow.
underground hardened tunnels, you know, large numbers of nuclear missiles hidden in it. Our underground Great Wall is. What a lousy job the defense did with these silos. Obviously, they were either surprised by the silos because they didn't report about it in their report on China to Congress 3 months ago. Not a word about these silos, or because they don't want to admit, that China actually, they don't want to admit to one of these failures in history, basically, and the sharing estimate that China only has 200 weapons. How do you square enough DFL-41s going forward in 2 to 3 years for 1,450 weapons? That doesn't make any sense. Something's wrong, and it's probably the DoD estimate. And there's all kinds of bureaucratic reasons why they might not have told Congress, but it's also could be that they're just so incompetent that they didn't find it was up to some academic, Jeffrey Lewis, look through the commercial satellite imagery. And, but I don't know. Am I explaining myself that? Because that's probably
Yeah.
that you do not need.
Something regarding what you just said. I wanted to ask you about.
Don't need.
Do you think that because we think we have enough weapons, but you're saying, we're not, when it's an illusion. Who is bluffing who when they say, they say people talk tensions are rising between U.S. and China. China's not going to try anything. Oh, we know they wouldn't try. Who do you think is bluffing? Are we both bluffing? Is China bluffing? They're not going to really do anything. Are we bluffing? Not really going to do anything. What do you think?
I think.
You think we're bluffing?
I think.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Because the balance of power is so much against us. Show that we're in big trouble if we try to save Taiwan. Close the South China Sea, China. Our own war games show us losing. Same thing with Russia when it comes to Ukraine, the Baltic states, NATO frontline states. Every war game shows that Russia can roll over those areas in 72 hours.
Wow.
Basically in a war against us. When our own war games, run by our own strategic optimists in the Pentagon, that we lose, that means we're the ones who are bluffing.
We're
Win.
That's very good. The winner doesn't have to bluff. The person who thinks they probably may lose is the one that's bluffing, correct?
Yeah, right. And then look at the disparity of interests. How valuable is, as we talked about before at the beginning of the show, how really important, I hope nobody from South Korea and Japan, but I'm sure and their confidence in our security guarantees has been greatly undermined, because perspective, they have to say, be willing to sacrifice itself in a nuclear war, for example, or a blackout war for the sake of Taiwan's sovereignty, or for the sovereignty of South Korea, or for Japan, or for the Baltic states, or the NATO frontline states. Are we really willing to go that far? Whereas China considers Taiwan part of its territory. It has much higher political in capturing Taiwan. You know, Taiwan for them would become an instinctable, not to mention the very existence of Taiwan is a constant existential threat to the dominance of the Chinese, because Taiwan considers itself the legitimate government. China has
Correct.
sees Taiwan as a, whereas we, what is our interest in perfecting Taiwan? You know, I would suggest that our strategic and political interest in those of China.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you weren't okay, just the and China, you know, is just like we are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but when you have an imbalance in interests, you can defeat us, as proven during the Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam is a pygmy compared to the United States.
Right.
Political, geostrategic interest, you know, was much higher than our there, you know, and sacrificing the blood and all, sacrificing soldiers and putting up with the counterculture and anti-war protests that were dividing us at home.
Right.
You know, when push came to shove, by every measure, vastly superior to North Vietnam, counted the most the political will to stay the course and achieve. Had it all over us. North Vietnam. Same thing with the Korean War. You know, where we only, it wasn't a victory war, it was the Korean War, it was an armistice.
Armistice.
Yeah.
We don't have a peace treaty.
You know, we managed to sovereignty of South Korea. You know, but we didn't defeat North Korea. Briefly on the battlefield, at the end of the day, we didn't defeat them. North Korea still exists. And
Correct.
Another pygmy power that fought us to a draw, basically. Now, of course, they had the help of China, but China and North Korea, and but their political interests in preserving adversary to us were much greater than in destroying North Korea, so that they could no longer pose a threat to South Korea. And so again, and those are situations where China is not a pygmy, greater geostrategic interests in Taiwan, North Korea either, because it's got nuclear weapons, which makes them
A superpower.
I mean, most people will object and say, "What are you talking about, pride?" Any country that can destroy you and
It's a superpower.
I don't care if they're a failed state in every other respect, and when their people are brainwashed, and their economy, you know, is when they can make a nuclear EMP attack with nuclear weapons and blast them, that makes you a superpower, a military superpower. North Korea can do things to us that Nazi Germany and Japan could only dream about.
Wow. So, and I think that goes back to what you said, other programs, that the North Koreans have, is it one or two satellites they pass by the U.S. every day. Is that correct? You told me? And that could be an EMP weapon?
Several times.
How many times?
A day, their KMS.
Several times.
Several times a day. 4 satellites orbit over us. And that they are nuclear armed for EMP attacks. The Congressional EMP Commission right in their report, warns that they might be. And we have good reason to fear that it might be. You know, you could fit a super EMP weapon inside those satellites. The satellites are treated as part of their strategic forces for some reason. The satellites resemble Soviets during the Cold War for maybe fractional orbital bombardment system. You know, the trajectory goes south north. It flies over the South Pole and approaches us from the south. And we have no space in the south, so that we're blind. And both of these satellites come up that way. And you know, we were so concerned that we recommended that the satellites be shot down. The Trump administration didn't do that. Didn't do many things that the Trump had to do, and this is not to belittle President Trump, but it's just to be realistic. He was not the perfect president, despite whatever myth might happen. Obviously, I think he's vastly superior. All right, but he fell short in many areas. You know, because he didn't drain the swamp. He was trying to himself as an anti-establishment guy. I mean, why now? You know, we have General Miley in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What a disaster! How come the president didn't bring back all those excellent patriotic generals that President Obama fired and make them the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and staff the Pentagon with people, you know, who shared his values but that's another topic.
Right. That's another topic.
Right.
Okay, but you mentioned regarding North Korea. So if North Korea wanted to, we talked about superpowers, because everybody only thinks of superpowers. When you think of superpower, you think of U.S., Russia, and China. You wouldn't consider North Korea a superpower, but like you're saying, you said if a country has nuclear power, nuclear bombs, you know, ICBMs, they're a superpower. I know we haven't mentioned it, but I wanted to ask you, and I want people to hear it from you. And you mentioned the last program regarding Iran, and I think we haven't talked a lot about that tonight. But I wanted to, before we do finish tonight, I want you to mention Iran, because majority of people, and I think the President Biden is beginning to want to try to go back to the JCPOA and start that up again. Do you believe, and I want people to know, you told me that the Iranians probably may have a nuclear weapon at this time. Is that correct?
It's highly likely that Iran weapons at this time. In fact, that it nuclear weapons by the year 2003. Also has them miniaturized for delivery, at least on their Shahab 3 medium-range ballistic missile. It's possible that they could deliver them by satellite, the way North Korea is doing. And my reason for thinking that, well, after all, earlier this, North Korea demonstrated the capability to orbit. That this demonstrated the possibility, and their space program, which is the world's most sophisticated terrorist organization.
Yep.
But why do I think when almost everybody in Washington don't have the bomb yet? I find it hard to understand why anybody thinks Iran doesn't have the bomb. All right, first, prior to 2003, We know that successful implosion experiment. This is the ability to compress a uranium or plutonium sphere. And they actually did that, and they demonstrated that, and they were making new detonators. These are basic nuts of a nuclear weapon, and that was prior to 3. Also prior to 2003, we know that they had designs for, I think it was about 19 different designs for atomic weapons to try to fit them into the high explosive warhead for the Shahab 3 medium range ballistic missile. It's a lot harder to design a nuclear weapon than it is to change the shape of a reentry vehicle to accommodate your weapon. Why were they monkeying around changing the shape of the physics package, the nuclear weapon, so they could fit it inside this reentry vehicle? Well, it's obvious, that what they plan to do is take the high explosives out and put a nuclear weapon in to turn that into a nuclear warhead. But on the outside, the reentry vehicle would look the same, like a high explosive warhead. And we would see that Shahab 3 and say, oh, it's just a normal Shahab 3. It's not a nuclear armed missile. They've gone through extraordinary measures, unlike the North Koreans, who have boasted about their nuclear program, okay? And the Iranians have been very secretive about it and have tried to conceal it. So all these things that they had done, the U.S. Manhattan Project in World War II, how far we were doing implosion experiments and building bridge wire detonators. We were within a few months. Okay. So Iran was very close to an atomic, take a highly enriched uranium and put it into the implosion device, and you basically would have had a bomb. And I also think that another assumption we make that is false is about all of Iran's program. The only thing the nation's International Atomic Energy, the only thing that worked, nuclear power program, basic. And Iran, just like Korea, has got all kinds of centrifuges and hidden in military bases where it has probably been making weapons grade material for many years. So the other thing that leads me to believe that Iran has the bomb is for the past decade, the intelligence community has been saying Iran is within 6 months to 1 year from getting a bomb. For the past,
I've heard that.
All right? Mm-hmm. And you have to believe that Iran, for some mysterious reason, has refrained, for a decade or since 2003 from building a nuclear weapon. Why would they do that? And finally, I think the nail in the coffin, or what should be the nail in the coffin, is when Israel stole Iran's secret archives, or part of the secret archives. The secret archives revealed that Iran had a clandestine nuclear weapons program, the objective of which was to build 5 nuclear weapons by the year 2003. Now, all the indicators in terms of their development of technology indicates they achieved that goal, by 2003, and that they far surpassed it by today, but that they probably have a fairly large number of nuclear weapons. Oh, and another point.
How many would you say they have?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to make an estimate because it depends on how much enriched uranium and enriched plutonium they have. And we can't, and since if my theory is correct, and they are doing that in these underground military bases, I don't know. It's that they could have, it's possible that they have 100, I think that that is not realistic.
Wow.
I say that because North Korea and Iran are partners. They're strategic partners. There are North Koreans in Iran helping them with their missile program and probably with their nuclear program. North Iranians have been present. Iranian scientists have been present at every North Korean nuclear test. It may be that North Korea has transferred at least the design information, if not actual nuclear weapons, to Iran. And and so some analysts. So I think it's possible that Iran actually has, through its partner North Korea, that whatever North Korea has got, Iran may have. Iran has a lot more money than North Korea. Iran is, they could have bought anything from North Korea.
Correct.
More realistic analysts, recently people have opened their eyes about North Korea and said, North Korea could have 100 nuclear weapons. If that's true for North Korea, it could also be true for Iran. They're sort of a mirror image of each other. Both of them have nuclear weapons programs. The North Koreans have been more overt about their,
correct,
because they want to use them to drive us out of the Pacific and achieve their other geostrategic goals.
Iran.
Because the reason, is because you're not interested, and you're not interested in advancing the of Iran that way. The only reason is so that you would eventually use them in a surprise attack.
So, in other words, you just said it. You mentioned surprise attack, and I know for a long time, and I think this one before we finish, I wanted to ask you this one. For a long time, we've had Israel thinking of attacking. Has wanted the United States to get involved in a war and to do something with Iran. And they've got. I remember through George W. Bush, with Obama, with Trump, nobody's really gone with the idea of attacking like they did with Iraq. Is it possible that's the reason we're not doing so? Because if they do, and they know that they do have nuclear bombs, they're not going to do an invasion of Iran like they did with Iraq, knowing that the nation may have nuclear bombs. Is that be a deterrent to the possibility?
I don't think so.
No.
Is smart enough to
okay.
It's only this. My belief that Iran has nuclear weapons is shared. Jim Woolsey, Dr. Bill Grazer, the chairman of the EMP Commission, and ran NASA by Fritz Ehrmarth, who was an ad National Intelligence Council, the Rights of National Intelligence, Ambassador Henry Cooper, who ran the strategic, that I and other very senior people of us believe.
Okay.
And we haven't been invited even once to testify views on this.
Wow.
The JCPOA. The JCPOA because they think it's a pathway to Iran eventually getting the bomb. I don't know if these people don't read or if they don't think, but the much more likely real reason to be against the JCPOA is because Iran already has the bomb. It got it a long time ago. And it's just, I guess it's this whole arms control thing. I mean, the JCPOA is another good example of how hope springs eternal, you know, and the intelligence community, the State Department, they know that the president thinks that there's hope to stop Iran from,
Right.
and to do it by negotiation. Our favorite way of solving problems, having a scrap, going to make the problem go away. The way Neville make World War II go away. Peace in our time, with the scrap of paper he signed with.
It didn't work.
A perennial failing democracy, and I think it's the same principle at work. No, not wanting to face the unpleasant realities, and instead. You know, in Washington, well, the intelligence community been wrong. They've been wrong. Right? Why trust them? Especially when you know, they've been political. Always want to tell presidents what they want to hear. You know, no president, sir, Iran is a nuclear weapon, or watch. Now, what are you going to do about it? You know,
exactly.
So
they don't want to hear that.
Right. You know, so that's the problem. And you know, and until Iran actually sets off a nuclear weapon, you know,
nobody's going to believe it.
Yeah, nobody's going to believe it, I guess. They'll, well, shouldn't say nobody. The people who do believe it, you know, are some of the best minds in the U.S. national security community. And on the Israeli side, I've been to Israel quite a bit. And I don't know if anybody, I didn't meet anybody in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Israelis in the national security community, there's some officers think Iran already has the bomb too, you know. But their official position has been doesn't have the bomb
that
yet.
They don't.
Yeah, because that's what the U.S. intelligence community says. That's what U.S. presidential administrations say. Israel is so anxious to not lose U.S. friendship.
Correct.
Take the position we take. Privately, believe it's the wrong position, and that
they already have it.
Yeah. However, going back to your original point about us invading, this could become an enormous catastrophe for us. You know, if I am right,
yes.
And Iran has the bomb, because then the real good military solution to the Iranian, it would not only even a massed U.S.-Israel air operation would, simply because we don't know where the we would have to back with this fantasy about Iran not being incompetences or intelligence community. What they should be doing is looking for where are those bombs? Where are the missiles? The targets we have to hit. And you tell yourself, well, they don't have the to go looking for those things, which means a good strike plan to try to protect ourselves. And that's how we might not be able to develop a good strategy to hide everything, but certainly we have no hope of doing it when these people aren't even looking.
They're not even looking. Well, Dr. Pry, this has been a lot of info, a lot of information here on Are You Ready? And before we finish tonight, I want to give you the last opportunity. If you want, after all this time that we've spoken, and you've spoken about with Iran, we're talking about North Korea. Of course, we spent some time talking about China. Of all that we've spoken about, what would you like our audience to remember? What would be the most important thing you would like them to remember after all this, what you've talked about?
I'd like them to remember most of all this threat,
Okay.
the combination of cyber and sabotage that could end our civilization literally at the end of light.
Wow.
And shut out the lights everywhere. My colleagues will be angry if I. But there's a website, two websites. One of them is www.us, www.emptask.us.
Yeah.
That's a website for my EMP task force. My colleagues are always jumping on me, talk for an hour, and I never give the websites. But there I've done it. I don't go to websites myself.
Right. Me too.
I would recommend that become,
Right.
get wars or my book, Power of the Light. God, a blank executive governor of your state, and it would protect your state from blackout warfare, from EM. It's also got a blank bill in there. Your state solutions don't have to come from Washington. You should be state protected, so that if the lights go out in the country, you can keep the lights on in your state. You can do that, by getting my book, Blackout Warfare, and send a copy to your governor, send a copy to your state representative, and say, I want this bill passed. I want the governor to start the process of protecting us. The power and the light. And send that out. Send a copy to every member of Congress, the motives. We have an excellent executive order.
Okay.
We're protecting all of our life-sustaining critical infrastructures in EMP. Very low priority, and almost nothing is being done. The book is better, than listening to me on this website. It would provide policymakers with an education on this and build a fire under them to act. So you don't have to just sit there passively and become a victim. You should exercise, your rights as an American. Try to get the government to do its job and protect our country.
Correct.
and your
Correct.
state and your family from this. And just in case none of that works, be prepared yourself.
People.
Stockpile food and water, have a medicine kit and know how to use it, have a plan in
Yes.
your head. But what do you do if the lights go out, maybe forever?
For an extended period of time. Thank you, Dr. Pry. That is, ladies and gentlemen, all those who have watched this program, this is great information. And what he just said, be prepared. Don't wait till the last minute. As he has stated, it could happen and it can happen pretty quick. You need to do your part at home. Have plenty of water, non-perishable foods. Have things that you got to be prepared. Don't wait till the last minute and then say, I want to rush, and you won't be able to. So I think you should do that right now. Don't wait till the last minute. Dr. Pry, once again, thank you again for being here on Are You Ready? And I wish you the best. And continue. The website you mentioned is www.emptaskforce.us. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Again, www.emptaskforce.us. So if you're watching, please, this is very important information. Please subscribe to Are You Ready? Please share this video with as many people as possible. This is very important information that needs to be heard. And please use discernment, ask God for discernment, use this information and share it with other people. Okay. Thank you for joining us here on Are You Ready? We hope you have a very blessed evening. Dr. Pryor, thank you for being a blessed evening for you, and thank you for being once again in the program. We wish you the best. Okay.
Thank you so much, and God bless your audience. Save the United States.
Yes, amen. We do pray for the U.S. We pray for peace, and we pray that none of these things really happen. But just in case, be prepared. Thank you, Dr. Pryor. Have a blessed evening. Good night, everybody, and thank you for joining us here on Are You Ready? Good night, everybody. Shalom.